Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching us here on YouTube and on Facebook, raising your health IQ coast to coast and around the world, and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And what a success story we have with us on the program today. We have Craig Pettigrew, a true MS thriver, I should say. Thanks for being here, my friend.
No problem.
We just had the opportunity to meet literally not more than an hour ago, and I am so excited that you're now sitting in the hot seat because your story is too good not to share. Looking at you today, just meeting you, I had no idea that you have this kind of horrific past with multiple sclerosis. It's got to be like a night and day difference for you to be sitting here today versus, just 3, 4, 5 years ago, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When did MS first pop up on your radar? When did you know that something was amiss with your health?
1995 was the first time that I experienced something. I experienced numbness and tingling in my leg when I was biking to work and school. And I was concerned, and it just sort of got worse as the day went on, and I had no idea what was going on. I eventually talked with my advisor and asked him if I could go to the doctor, and he said yes. And then I went to the doctor, which is interesting because I biked to school that day, and I had to bike to the hospital. So I get to the hospital, the nurses take a look at me and have me walk around and are like, your gait is off, your temperature is off, something's going on. They advised me to a neurologist. The neurologist took a look at me and wound up performing a CT scan on my brain. And I looked at the CT scan and I saw what looked like black jelly beans all over my brain. And I looked at the radiologist, who was like, that doesn't look right. And she said, no, that doesn't look right. So after that, they wound up doing more tests and stuff. And then after I don't remember how long it wound up being. I was out of school and worked for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't know how long it was, long time ago. But they wound up coming back and saying, you may have MS. Everything says you have MS, but you need another exacerbation. It has to be separated by time. And I didn't have, that was my first exacerbation, so they weren't able to diagnose it. So they were like, watch out for other symptoms.
I'm curious, when you say that your leg felt numb and it was tingly, for those who have not experienced that, is that like when your foot goes to sleep, or what was it like for you?
It is kind of like your foot goes to sleep, but instead of, when your foot goes to sleep, it usually is affected when you put your foot down, and it's the numbness and tingling there. For me, it wound up being when I put my foot down, the numbness and tingling came in from the side and pressed into the side of my leg. And I was like, this is just odd.
I would imagine that would be quite the unique sensation, especially being on your bike and pushing down on the pedal. It was just probably really repetitive and just like, what is it? Yeah.
And it just got worse as the day went on. I was walking around on stage doing work loading in a show, and that's when everything really felt odd. And I was like, all right, talked to my advisor, was like, my leg is acting up.
Yeah.
So he let me go to the doctor. And
you said your temperature was also off. Were you running a fever, or were you running cold?
I was running cold. It was down around 95.
And you had biked to the hospital, like, let's not.
And it was fall. That. It was fall of 1995. I can't remember if it was September or October.
And where were you at this point?
Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Okay, so it wasn't exactly too terribly cold at that point.
Right, no, it wasn't.
Interesting. So that's 1995. That's your first exacerbation, as you call it. Did the symptoms continue after that?
They gradually went away. It wound up, I wound up with like optic neuritis after all that. They took a look at me, my eyes, a friend told me my eyes would jump up. I'd be like looking at things and my eyes would jump up.
Hmm.
And they're just constantly flicking up like that. And I was like, okay, this is weird. I couldn't read, I couldn't see, I couldn't watch TV. It was miserable. And that eventually calmed down. I don't know why it calmed down. I didn't really seem to change anything. I slept a little bit and tried to take it easy. I wasn't really quite thinking about a diet connection to MS at that point.
Sure. As long as you bring that up, what was your diet like at this point?
I basically ate the standard American diet. I ate a lot of fast food. I mean, I was in college. I was in graduate school, so I'm eating a lot of junk food, a lot of fast food, really cheap food, drinking a little bit of beer or a lot of beer.
There it is. I was like, a little bit. I was like, we're talking college here, Craig.
Yep.
Yeah, I got you. So, but you're doing all of this, but I can't imagine that was any different from your friends and your cohorts in the theater.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, were you, I mean, you seem like a physically active guy. You're biking to work, you're biking to the doctors. You were a skater as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this must have been especially kind of frustrating and puzzling. So other than the eyes darting, did the numbness ever recur in your legs?
The numbness gradually, the numbness went away fairly quickly. The eyes took about a week to go away. I wound up getting glasses after that. And I think that helped a little bit with some of the eye issues.
So when did things kind of reach a head for you? Because I think it was a number of years later, like more than a decade later, when you were like, oh, man.
Yeah, it took, I mean, I wound up, getting a job in theater, and I noticed I'd periodically get things where I'd get numbness in my hands or tingling in my hands. I do remember it felt like I had rubber bands around my wrists and a lot of numbness and tingling in my hand. And it was just sort of like someone or something was squeezing my wrist and cutting off the circulation of my hands, or just one hand, because it was more my left hand at that time. And I didn't really think much about it. And
you didn't think heart related at that point?
I didn't really think heart related.
Okay.
It wasn't until I actually, it wasn't until years later I started really thinking about, okay, maybe it is my diet and lifestyle that's affecting my health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I started searching for answers elsewhere. So I started reading a lot of books and stuff, and I wound up picking up a copy of the China study, and I read it, and T. Colin Campbell basically has a whole list of diseases that are related to whole food, to diet, and MS was one of them.
I want to get to that, but I want to go back just a little bit to a day in 2008. We haven't yet talked about the fact that you were a figure skater.
Right.
You actually skated for the Walt Disney Company for a little while, but there was a day in 2008 when that was also kind of a wake-up call for you. Talk to us about what happened on the ice that day.
So I was in Ohio skating with my brother, who's actually a figure skater himself. I was doing what I usually do. I like to do a lot of jumps and spins and stuff. So I was just popping double jumps and spinning and practicing, which I tended to do at least once a week. I did a double flip. I did the rotation. I checked out. I landed, but I didn't glide out on the landing. I just hit the ice and stopped because something was off. It did not feel right. It didn't feel comfortable anymore. And my brother, I'm standing there in the ice, shaking my head, wondering what's going on. My brother sees me. He skates up and goes, "What's up? What's wrong?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And he goes, "Do it again." So I took a warm-up lap, and then came through and did another double flip, checked out, landed it, and stopped again, and was like, no, this is not right. And it was like 2 weeks later, I started noticing that on all the jumps that I did.
Was it the same kind of numbness and just weird sensation that you had on the
numbness
bike?
and tingling at all. It was just something was different.
Huh.
The numbness and tingling went away a long time. Like that went away in 96, I believe it was. But and I mean, even to this date, I can't describe what it was.
Right.
And I think that was just part of my brain or something atrophying, and something was off.
Right. And these are jumps that you had done for many
hundreds,
years. Yeah.
Hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Right.
I mean, a double flip, to me, I could land it every time. I rarely fell on that jump. In fact, all my doubles, I rarely fell on them. I could pop them. I could do an axle and do it in any position. I could crouch over and do an axle like somebody, curled up in a ball. And
just not anymore, huh?
Not anymore.
Okay, so how long from that date in 2008 until when you started to explore what the connection could be with your diet?
Let's see, 2008. It actually took quite a bit of time, because it was like 2011, I was actually diagnosed with MS. 2012, I was put on disease-modifying drugs and all the assortment of other drugs to counter side effects.
How many medicines were you taking throughout the course of a day?
It was probably 5.
Gotcha.
It wasn't a huge amount, 4 to 5, I'd say.
That's still a healthy number.
Yeah, it's still a healthy number.
Sure.
Too much for a person who never took medicine at all. Ever.
Right. And what was happening overall to kind of your quality of life at that point? I know that we can't exactly go into detail on certain things, but, just overall, your work in the theater, you're just being a professional, the ability to get out on the ice, anything. What was happening with your quality of life throughout that time?
It was sort of vanishing. It was like I was becoming a little more forgetful at work, and I was not doing the job as accurately as I had been. I started recognizing it, and had stopped theater in like 2008 and decided to go work a different job. I started doing engineering for a company that built the rigging systems at the Guthrie Theater. And
I mean, just the fact that you're looking at me now, I just see like you're thinking back and how hard that was for you at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I almost see like a little bit of emotion coming out of you just
Right.
thinking back on it. So you get the opportunity to explore the connection with your diet. You read the China study by T. Colin Campbell. What really popped off the pages there and made you think,
Well, he listed out the diseases in it that could be cured with it, which is cancer, cardiovascular disease. The third one was multiple sclerosis, lupus. He has a list of about, I think it was 19 different diseases. And I was like, okay, if he's got multiple sclerosis in here, I want to see if it will actually change the course of multiple sclerosis if I change my diet. And so I did, and it took me a few years to actually change the diet, and then a few more years to get brave enough to tell my doctor I wanted off disease-modifying drugs.
What did you notice, even though it was a gradual transition for you, what did you start to notice as you started to increase the number of whole foods, fruits, vegetables you were consuming?
Noticed that they made me feel better. I mean, they made me feel a lot more active. I mean, because if I eat a whole food plant-based diet, I have all the energy in the world to do whatever I want to do.
Right.
And it's like nowadays, I'll hop on my bicycle and I'll do a 30, 40 mile bike ride.
No numbness in the legs?
No numbness, no tingling.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got your life back, it sounds.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And was that, I mean, I can't imagine it was an overnight switch that got flipped for you in terms of your health, but did you see like the health just continued to improve more and more as you transitioned more and more toward that healthier diet?
Yes. Yeah. And I actually started realizing that, I mean, it took, basically what I said when I read it is, I'm going to go vegan.
Right.
And so I started eating a lot of vegan foods to get off of meat and using a lot of vegan processed meats. And then as I was eating those, I started realizing maybe I need to get off processed foods and move more towards a whole food plant-based diet. And really, when I hit the whole food plant-based diet, that's when everything just changed for me.
So, fun question now, change of pace. What are some of the ones that the foods that you really love to eat now? Give us an example of your daily menu.
I mean, basically, breakfast, I usually make myself a big bowl of oatmeal, which is just chock full of blueberries. It'll be hard to go through everything.
Yeah, I got you. That's the typical plant-based eaters. We're just going to put a whole bunch of healthy stuff in with some oatmeal. Yeah.
And it's like I still eat that. I still make a breakfast, and the great thing about that is you can just change any of the vegetables you're putting in it.
Sure.
And you can just rotate, so you're not eating the same thing every single day.
Sure. Are you like completely salt, oil, sugar-free guy, or? Yeah.
Not quite. I'd like to be. I'm trying to drift to that point. Because as I'm starting to see that Dr. Esselstyn, with reversing heart disease and stuff, reading his books and stuff, I've added that in to see if that would help improve things as well.
Absolutely. Now, I would love to hear about the conversation you had with your doctors when you started to notice some gains in your health and you were like, I'm eating a whole food plant-based diet now. What was their reaction when you had that conversation?
Basically, they were like, that won't work. And I was like, fine, I will try to prove it that it will work.
Did you ever reach a point where you actually had to change doctors because they just were not on board with your course of action?
I did.
Yeah.
I changed a couple times.
Yeah. And your newer doctor, the doctor who you're working with now, are they a little bit more receptive?
He is a little more receptive. He still doesn't think it'll work, but he's basically told me, whatever you're doing seems to be working, keep doing it. But he's like, I don't understand how or anything.
That happens a lot. No surprise. I mean, you may or may not realize that doctors really get no formal nutrition education. So there's a definite gap and a need for that. But I'm glad that he's at least supportive of your mission now. And I would imagine that with your transition and reclaiming your health, you feel really inspired to help others now as well.
Absolutely. I really want to find other people that want to reverse their MS, because if I can do it, I think anybody can do it. But
have you been back out on the ice at all?
I have tried to skate. It feels like I've never skated in my life.
Okay, but is that just because you're rusty? I mean, like, let's qualify that.
It could be. I mean, I think about that and I'm like, I probably have to go back and be trained from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to go through that amount of hours of training. I probably have friends that would be willing to help me do that.
Yeah.
Since I have a fair amount of figure skating friends.
What about just riding your bike? You still do that?
I do that quite a bit, and I love to ride.
No problems?
No problems.
No problems whatsoever. So what does the future look like for you now?
That one's the hard one. I really want to help. I mean, I'm kind of doing it. I'm working with Plant Pure Communities, which of course got a name change, is having a name change.
Sure.
But I'm working with them to help other people learn that diet can help reverse a disease.
There you go. So you want to use your story to inspire others and affect change. And I think that that's fantastic. And I'm so happy for you that you've been able to reclaim your health. And it's been, what, 3 years now that you've been on the whole food plant-based path? Or
I've been on the whole food plant-based path since 2014.
Oh.
So 2014, I went whole food plant-based. 2016, I got off disease-modifying drugs, and I've been on a whole food plant-based diet since 16.
And since 16 to present day, which is 2024, symptom-free, largely?
Largely.
Yeah. Outstanding. Well, I would say, Craig, that the future is bright for you, my friend.
I think it is too.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story.
All right. Thank you very much.